So my fictive culture is called Zuria. This slideshow right here is a summary of the entire presentation. Moving on to the culture context and bio of founders. So Zuria was basically created when 10,000 people around the world wanted to escape modern day civilization. And the reasons why they wanted to escape was because they were tired of their daily lives, their jobs, the technologically ran world, the current culture they were living in, and the high crime rates in many of the countries, and the lack of government intervention when it came to crime. People were frustrated by social expectations, rules, limitations, and so 10,000 of these people from around the world came together and they bought an island and they named it Zornion. The main founder of Zornion and the Zuria culture is Juliet Brown. Juliet Brown was an activist against war in her home country, so she created an online community where there were people around the world that were similarly frustrated with their life, and the community started electing more leaders, and the leaders decided that this online community would buy and move into an island, and they picked an island where agriculture and fish were accessible, so they would have a great food source and they could live here for generations to come. Okay, so moving on to the laws, morals, and norms of Zuria culture. So one of the most important laws that Zuria culture has is not harming others or others' property. So this would include no stealing, violence, or murder. Um, Another important law on the island is that people are to abandon and not use any technology. This is because people are expected to abandon their old life and connection to the outside world behind, because there is a belief that the outside world is chaotic. And one way they're expected to do that is by abandoning technology. So number three would be no trade or contact with the outside world. And number four is mandatory voting on policy if a person is over the age of 18. So if a person is over the age of 18, they must vote on every law. And for a law to be passed, it has to get at least 51% of the vote. So for morals, one important thing that Zuria people like to follow is to treat everyone with respect and kindness. They really dislike conflict, and they try to make everyone on the island feel welcomed and comfortable. Um, Another thing that is really pushed in Zuria culture is the idea of not looking into the past. So people are expected to leave any connection they have with another culture or their outside life behind and completely adapt into Zuria culture through language, mindset, etc. So, and another really important moral is not lying. So people on the island, they try to be as truthful as possible, and people are often actually very transparent and honest in many situations because they just because lying is just frowned upon. So some norms that exist on Zernion or in the Zuria culture are that trading is used to buy most material goods, and there is a currency that exists on the Zernian island, but most of that currency is used to buy expensive material goods like homes. Trading is used to buy everyday items. Um, Another norm is that people usually spend around 30 hours a week hunting and gathering food. So except for those that serve society in like a specialized way, like doctors or judges, most people hunt and gather food, and they usually spend around 30 hours a week hunting and gathering food, and this is usually their primary job, or they work in the food center. And number three, another norm is that people spend time celebrating the island. So there's many events through the year where people gather and they celebrate their life on the island. They celebrate being on the island. They believe that they're lucky to be on the island, and they believe that the outside world is chaotic. And so when these celebrations take place, there's food, dancing, and games. So deviant subculture and taboos. So there are some people, especially some people in the newer generations, that feel like unsatisfied with their life on the island and they want to explore the outside world. Many of them are curious about other cultures and they want to learn more about other cultures. So this group of people has started building boats, and some of them have actually been able to leave the island successfully. So one of the major taboos is actually leaving the island. Even though there's no laws against leaving the island, it's really a taboo to try to leave because Zornion is seen as perfect. Um, and if people decide to leave, they can return, but they're not treated as as they were before, and they're not treated welcome like they're welcomed by society on the island. And another taboo is lying to others. So if a person is caught lying on the island, they're often like shunned by the community, and this shunning actually lasts for a few weeks, because lying is just seen as really morally bad. On a person's 25th birthday, there is a big celebration that takes place because there is a belief in Zuria belief that people generally have about three life stages and they reach them at the ages of 25, 50, and 75. And when a person reaches about 25 years of age, it's believed that they have reached they have completed the first stage of their life. And those who live over 75 years old are actually considered to be rare on the island, and they're super respected and seen to be given an extra life stage by God. So the preliminal stage of the ritual, it consists of people preparing for their 25th birthday by grooming themselves a week before, and they often spend like hours grooming themselves for their big day. And for the liminal stage, people on the day of the celebration, or the birthday person has to jump through 25 hoops to symbolize 25 years of their life. The post-liminal stage is at the end of the celebration where a person gets a tattoo of their choice to symbolize the completion of their life stage. And then the status change would be the person has completed the first stage and is now on to the next stage of their life. So now let's discuss the language and grammar in the Zuria language. So some phonemes in the language would be ja, ga, na, ha, and ta. And some examples of morphemes would be aja, which means land, god, which means view, or hafa, which means perfume. And then there's some more examples on the slide. And some syntax rule that make the language special is that the sentence starts with a verb in the language, and each sentence ends with a slash in the language. So moving on to kinship and descent. So the type of descent in the culture is bilateral. So kinship is passed through both parents, and children are able to inherit property and possessions from both parents. Marriage structure and type. So marriage spouse practices. The Zuria people, they really only marry people that are on the island, and so they practice endogamy. This is because they believe the people that are outside of the island are corrupted and immoral, and the majority of people on the island don't have any interest in leaving the island, so they're not really even influenced by outside views. So the type of marriage structure, so both polygamy and monogamy are practiced, and most people consider both of these acceptable when it comes to marriage structure. And people are allowed to have one partner or multiple partners if they want, but there is a small fraction of people who believe that only monogamy is acceptable. There is a tradition where if a man marries a woman, he gives her a necklace, and the necklace is usually made out of shells and pearls, and he can either make this necklace himself or he can buy it from a merchant. So some marriage practices, so divorce, for example, is acceptable, but couples are encouraged to wait 6 months before they divorce. And if they have any children together, then they must raise the children until the children are adults. Um, so, what are their views on premarital sex? So, premarital sex is frowned upon in their culture. Even though the Zoria people are super flexible when it comes to marriage structure, so they're like flexible, they allow both monogamy and polygamy. They frown upon premarital sex because they want to make sure that if a child is born, then he has a family unit. Um, Same-sex marriage. The majority of people accept same-sex marriage in Zuria culture, but there is a small amount who believe only heterosexual monogamy is acceptable. And then family. So most families are nuclear. It's a nuclear family unit because a large amount of the population practices polygamy. So there's just not enough room for extended families to live together. So before people get married, they communicate about what is acceptable regarding sex, and all of the members or both of the members of the um, marriage must agree on the terms. And then contraceptives. So contraceptives are available to both men and women. They're readily available and easily accessible, but they're not the most effective because of the lack of technology and science on the island, and they only work about more than half the time. The Zoria people follow the Zuzan religion. So this religion is monotheistic, and they believe in one God. They believe that the Earth was founded by the merger of two planets, and they believe that humans are a result from the surviving life forms of these two planets. Um, they believe that those who do good deeds go to heaven, and those that do bad deeds stay on Earth. In order to go to heaven, your good deeds have to outweigh your bad ones, and even a single deed can be the determining factor of whether you go to heaven or stay on earth. People worship God by planting flowers as a gift to God, and different colors and different flowers symbolize different things. So, for example, if somebody is praying for love or wanting love in their life, then they would plant a red flower. Um, So they believe that human suffering results from an obsessed evil spirit, and they have shamans which communicate with spirits and they help remove spirits from people. Mode of production and exchange. So the primary mode of production is food foraging. So people spend about 30 hours a week hunting and gathering food or work at the food center, and this is most people's primary work. And the exchange source is redistribution. So people usually hunt and gather and then bring it back to the food center, and then food is organized and distributed back to the community. Internal differentiation. So wealth inequality definitely exists, but poverty is almost non-existent because the community provides for basic necessities for everybody, and then whatever you make on top of that, you get to use for your own personal use. And then division of labor. Most people work at the food center, except for those with specialized skills, or they bring food to the food center. And then people with disabilities are exempt from hunting and gathering, and then most people work 6 hours a day or 30 hours a week total. So, internal external relations, race and racism. So, race does exist and it's based on physical traits, but racism is not accepted within society. Racist stereotypes are seen as disrespectful and offensive. And immigration. So, immigration is allowed onto the island, and people that want to immigrate to the island, they have to accept the rules and abandon technology and their previous culture. And if people are thinking about possibly immigrating, they can stay on the island for up to 90 days and they have to make a decision on whether they want to stay or if they don't want to stay. The island has limited security because there's not many travelers to the island and it's pretty secluded from the rest of the world, so it doesn't really have threats in terms of other countries. Military, police, and prisons. So, since the culture doesn't deal with threats from the outside, it just deals with threats on the inside, and judges are the ones that assign punishments for crimes. And there's no official military group because there aren't threats from the outside, but there is a police force that exists, and but the police force has to follow strict rules and a strict code of conduct. So there are prisons that exist, but there isn't heavy punishment for most low-level crimes, and there is a focus on rehabilitation. So people or inmates are given an education on Zorian laws, morals, and ethics, and inmates are given a job when they are released as hunters and gatherers or at the food center. So here we have the stratification chart. At the bottom, we have the food center workers and the hunter and gatherers, which is most of the population. However, these people are not in poverty because they have all their basic needs met for and they're able to spend money on entertainment and other things that they like. And then we have merchants and law enforcement. So merchants are basically business owners, and law enforcement would be like police. They make a bit more than the food center workers and hunter and gatherers on average. And then we have healers, builders, and judges. So healers are doctors, builders are the ones that build houses and important parts of society, and then we have judges that deal with crimes. And then they make more on average than the merchants and law enforcement and the food center workers and hunter and gatherers by a large amount. And then at the top we have the leaders, local leaders, and make less than the major leaders on the island, but they still make substantially more than everybody else. Political organization. So political organization, there's elements of both state and tribal structure in the culture. So there's the same laws, morals, and ethics throughout the island. There's multiple leaders. There's local leaders, and then there's larger leaders. And then people also have specialized roles within society, even though a large amount are hunter and gatherers or food center workers. And then there is wealth inequality that exists within the island. There is some elements of tribe structure. For example, the way in which food is acquired is less advanced than than most state forms. Art forms. So, as mentioned earlier, jewelry made out of shells and pearls are an important part of the wedding tradition on the island, and it's given by men to women they want to marry, and it's an important symbolic thing in the culture. And on the right is a picture of what um, the necklace may look like, but I feel like this would be for somebody that's pretty wealthy to be able to afford this type of necklace. Most people would probably not be able to afford this many pearls. That will be all for my culture project. Thank you for watching.